Sunday talks about sex, baby. Sunday talks about you and me. Sunday talks about all the things pertaining to living with HIV. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. Hey, all right, It feels good to be back in the room, back at the table.
It's been a minute.
It has been a minute.
It's been a minute.
Talking all things HIV. Well, kind of, not all things. I'm dragging it, but as many things as we can talk about in the time that we have allotted, right?
Yes.
So, this is our whatever episode. I've lost count, and
all that matters is that we're getting the message to the people.
the message is out. Y'all here. We're here.
Okay.
Let's listen, okay? It's Sunday Sex Talks. We are today talking about HIV and mental health specifically, and how the two intersect. And so we have some special guests with us today. If you haven't been with us, I guess we should introduce ourselves. I guess that's important.
I was going to say.
Let's be sure that we get it. So I am Pastor Darrell Brown Jr., founding and senior pastor of Kingdom Builders Christian Center here in Omaha, Nebraska, as well as the testing specialist at Nebraska AIDS Project.
And I am Tommy Dennis, and I am the outreach coordinator at Nebraska AIDS Project.
All right, so, and today with us, we have some of the elites, my friends. We have some of the greats are with us. We have Mr. Andrew Alleman, who is the director of programs. Is that right? The director of programs.
Is that right?
Director of programs at Black and Pink. And then also from Black and Pink, we have, and I guess I should mention that Andrew has a master's in social work and is coming to us more so under that umbrella to talk to us about his experience with providing mental health services. And then we have the one, the only, the infamous, right?
Legendary.
The incomparable. Dominique Morgan.
It was infamous for me.
Miss Dominique Morgan is with us, the executive director of Black and Pink National. And so we're grateful to have her with us today to have a conversation about mental health, HIV, and those things as they pertain more specifically to incarceration. And so we're looking to delve into this conversation here and get some nuggets. I think some nuggets are going to be dropped today. I just got a hunch, you see. So I do want to start with you though, Tommy. Working with Nebraska AIDS Project, you've been there longer than I have. I'm the new kid on the block. So you have been there for a number of years, have worked with, volunteered, shared your story with Nebraska AIDS Project from early on in your diagnosis. And one of the things that I take note of at Nebraska AIDS Project is the attempt to provide what we would call wraparound services. That there is the opportunity to link individuals that are dealing with HIV diagnosis, linking them to various forms of services and support. Can you talk to us a little bit about how important those pieces are in HIV health outcomes?
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about HIV, I think, first of all, I think we do an injustice to think that it's the norm for people to find out that they are diagnosed with a life-changing illness such as HIV and have the expectation of them to enter into care immediately.
Okay.
That's not everybody's story.
Mm-hmm.
What tends to happen with the Nebraska AIDS Project and what the Nebraska AIDS Project specializes in is actually meeting the external needs, the other needs. So whether it be someone who is experiencing homelessness, whether someone needs mental health services like therapy, those kinds of things are things that Nebraska AIDS Project is going to specialize in because, I mean, the science is there, that someone who is having those needs met will do better with managing their diagnosis.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, I'm hearing you say that it is important to not just focus on the virus itself.
Absolutely.
Not just important to focus on the diagnosis and being sure that somebody goes and makes it to a doctor's appointment, but that there are other pieces of this that are important. It is important for individuals to know that they have financial support in various areas, so that they have stable housing, so that that there's food on the table, so that they are able to seek after mental health services. So then that pivots me a little bit to our mental health professional here at the table. Andrew, if you would talk to us a little bit about when we talk about mental health services for people that are living with HIV, what are ways that you have seen engagement in mental health services impact people living with HIV?
Yeah. I mean, as Tommy mentioned, anybody who is receiving some kind of news about a new diagnosis or just a new way of life, right? Like living with HIV changes the way you do things, the way you talk to people, the way you date sometimes, and so it's a new way of life. So when I think about mental health services, I really think about like mental wellness.
Okay.
And just overall wellness in our minds of really getting connected to feel like I can do this. There's a confidence, there's a piece of just feeling okay in my own skin, my own body, understanding myself. And so I would say the biggest piece I've seen is really just folks who are trying to navigate what is my next step? How do I carry on to be my best self, to be my authentic self, while not compromising the things that bring me joy, the things that I love. And so the way I've seen people engage is really just focusing on how do I center my day around a joy and being able to get out of bed and take my medications and be able to have somebody to talk to and not feel lonely and closed off, because that's something that can happen, with news that you don't know if you want to share. You can feel lonely and not want to share. So I think those are some really important pieces for folks that are living with HIV to really be able to figure out who can I talk to, who are my, how do I have this conversation, whether it's with family members or partners. So I would say that's the biggest thing that I've experienced, is that piece there.
How would you say that mental health services can assist people in navigating those needs? I heard you say things about like just the idea of trying to get up out of bed and centering joy for the day and figuring out ways to just navigate some of those everyday things that some of us take for granted that really do shift when someone receives life-altering news such as the HIV diagnosis.
Right.
What can you share with us maybe like some tangible benefits of like, here's what we want to try to strategize towards to support people in doing in those mental health settings?
Yeah, so the first thing I always ask people in those settings is kind of what I mentioned earlier of just, who are your people, right? Like, who are your people? Who do you talk to? Because if you think about it, most people feel confident in themselves and feel comfortable when they have somebody, right? It can be one person, it can be 10 people, but somebody, right? It can be in person, it can be written. So that's the first place that I really start, and I think that can help for that accountability piece to be able to reach your goals. A lot of folks that I've worked with that are living with HIV, yes, that's a piece of what we talk about, but that's not even the biggest part of what we talk about in mental health care, right? Sometimes it's like the anxiety of having those conversations. Sometimes it's the depression. Sometimes it's just like life, right? Like it's just like just
everyday stuff.
Right. We forget that we have, folks that are living with HIV have lives outside of HIV. Just their diagnosis, right?
Absolutely.
So it's this piece of like, I have other things to talk about. And so I never want people to think that that's the only thing that they're talking about. Other things work towards, we talk a lot about that medication adherence, right? It's a new focus in life, right? Of having to take meds every day or having to go see your doctor regularly. A lot of folks don't see their doctors regularly. So it's a new way of life. So it's new routine. How do I fit a new routine into my life? And another big piece is that relationships. How do I learn to love somebody else and love myself at the same time? And how have I seen that shifted, through this diagnosis? And if not, great. If so, then that's something that we really dive into, to really think about how do I share that in a way that feels safe and affirming to me, but also that's news for my partner, and then having to deal with the partner's reaction,
Absolutely.
right? That's a new weight.
Absolutely.
So I would say each step that is taken, that may come with a new thing.
Uh-huh.
You know, a new thing to tackle, a new thing to experience. So yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits, and I'm hearing to seeking mental health therapy, seeking these services. There's a lot of benefit to that, not just around HIV, but just in general. I'm hearing you use a lot of things that like everybody's dealing with, right?
Yes.
Everybody is in need of finding their people. Everybody is in need of dealing with depression and all of these things, and so. I'm glad you bring that up because that then pivots me just a little bit here to Madam Dominique Morgan here to talk about the complexities of this subject matter when we add incarceration to the circumstance. Because it does muddy the waters. It does complicate things. It does shift the messaging. It shifts the accessibility, I would dare to say. It shifts a lot of things. And so I would love to hear from you about what type of services were you made aware of either during time that you served, during time that you were incarcerated, or during time that you have provided services to individuals that are incarcerated. What kind of mental health services are made available to people living with HIV?
I mean, Jesus.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, because they can't take that from you.
Okay. Okay.
You know, maybe a song that you could find some release in if you can afford to buy the CD or the song.
Okay.
Maybe if somebody else in the space is navigating your experience and you can share, if they don't feel like y'all are too close and they separate y'all on purpose, which was my experience. But like structural support is not there, and so that's like the lack of the services, and much of what Andrew is talking about or you all are talking about, folks, it's an initiative in there, right?
Yeah.
You got to feel empowered to take control. This is your stuff. You know, I can just lay the things out for you. You can't make somebody go to therapy. You can't make somebody take their meds.
Right.
So when someone's system impacted and when they're currently inside of a prison, there is an intentional disconnect from them and their power and their autonomy and choice. So not only are they not offering it, most folks don't know they should be asking for it, and they aren't positioned to feel empowered over their journey through HIV or AIDS to be like, yo, this is something that's missing. I know for myself, and I was sentenced in May of 2001, and I went to D&E, that Diagnostic and Evaluation Center here in Nebraska, the same day.
Okay.
I was, you know, they do a battery of tests when you come in, and it was maybe 60 days later because I was in a room already.
Okay.
And it's worse now, but back then we were over capacity, but they were kind of moving.
Okay.
So I was off the floor. So we all started sleeping on the floor. I was off the floor and in the room. So it was at least 60 days. And they called me down and took me down to medical, walked me into the room and like share with me the status with me, put me back in the holding cell, had the CO take me back to my cell upstairs. That was it. That was it. There wasn't even a discussion of medication or adherence because there's one infectious disease doctor in the entire Department of Corrections system. And so I got to OCC, and I remember going to the library and like looking up information, and like the most recent piece of anything was Magic Johnson's autobiography, which was like from the 80s or early 90s. So even in 2001, we know things aren't where they are now, but it very much gave people this idea that like this is a death sentence.
Absolutely.
And that's, so I also believe what folks do get their hands on becomes their truth. And so really that's what I, you know, at 19, turning 20, I was like, you know, I want to turn 30. And whatever happens in between now and 30, so be it. There was no care, right? And so not even a hunger to get the services around the mental health things I was navigating, or my depression, or wanting to take medications because I don't want to live. Like I don't I don't see anything ahead of me, and I think we assume people want to live.
Yeah.
We make that assumption for
we
most
do.
people, and not everybody has. Those of us who are wake up or navigate the day saying I want to be here, it's because we've found something to keep us here.
Absolutely.
When we've not supported folks in finding that for themselves, or everything around them is telling them there is nothing, it's never a surprise to me when either someone expresses that they are navigating suicidal ideations, or they leave us due to that, because. And it allows me to be a part of the process.
Yeah.
And not say, oh, they made a poor choice or whatever. How do we show up for them?
So that's powerful.
Very.
That leads me to some questions for you, Tommy, about, I know, well, pre-COVID. I feel like
Y'all just need a sign.
I feel like that is just a disclaimer for everything you got to bring up. It's
Or
pre-COVID.
just have it ring at the bottom.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, I know that you were doing some work with some of the jails and prisons. I know that you were doing some work to provide some education and some. Can you talk a little bit about what you were trying to provide in those spaces?
I mean, really, what it boils down to is what I'm trying. I mean, really, what I'm trying to do outside of the prison. I'm trying to normalize the conversation about HIV.
Okay.
Because knowledge is our greatest tool, right? And what I've found is that it's not for the lack of interest. It's just because they don't have the access.
Got it.
Because it's not being provided to them. So the thought was that if I could somehow get behind these walls and reach the individuals who are wanting this information but not getting this information, then we can start changing the direction as far as, for those who are living with HIV, their health outcomes, and for those who aren't living with HIV, their access and really their trajectory towards getting tested.
Let's be clear. If I was to get arrested today, even with the access and privilege, y'all coming down there to advocate for me, it'll probably take 2 or 3 days for me to get my medication.
That's right. That's right. I have experienced it for other
It would
people.
take 2 or 3 days, even me being me.
Yes.
So you imagine the person that is, the NAP client that can't call collect to get in to let time they're there, they don't have family, how long they sit, and they may complete their entire time there and not get access to their meds.
Well, and I mean even longer. I'm working with somebody now who is going through that, and they've been there for a month already, right? And already had told the medical providers that they're living with HIV,
And probably
right? And
placed
so
in solitary because of that status, but not getting their meds for that status.
So it's just like you think about, and this is why the mental health piece is so important, both inside and in the community, because you think about just the trauma that's wrapped into that, right?
That's what I'm
the trauma that's wrapped into. First of all, just take a new diagnosis, a new experience. And for some people, that experience, we assume that came from an enjoyable sexual experience, right? Like we assume that is the only way that somebody, can come in contact with HIV, but that's not the case, right? Like,
Not at all.
that's not always the case. And so I just think about, okay, how do I navigate maybe that experience that led to me having HIV in itself, the new diagnosis, and then you go to incarceration and you think about people telling you where you can sleep, where you can pee, where you can talk to. You have no autonomy, right? If you find out that diagnosis while you're inside, right? Who are your people? Once again, that's a question I always ask.
Right.
Who are your people? Who do you have around you? My people might be folks that I get a 10-minute, 5-minute phone call with when I can, or somebody that I'm writing a letter to in snail mail, which takes weeks for us to even go back and forth. So it's just like needing that person and that connection. There's nothing profound about mental health providers, right? We just sit with people and we just give them an opportunity to reflect and talk and think about things that they haven't been able to think about in a space of no judgment, right? In a space of no judgment, in a space where I'm not going to speak for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to create this space where you can navigate this stuff, and I'm just going to create it for you. But we don't get that. So I just think that when we think about it both inside and in the community, that piece in itself is just so important and so needed.
So I'm hearing that we got a level of trauma that is experienced as a result of the diagnosis outside, on the outside. And then that gets intensified by the experience of being on the inside, because the experience of being on the inside by itself is a traumatizing experience. And so I guess my next question then is, what kind of advocacy work, let's start with on the inside. I want to start with on the inside, because so often we start these conversations with people on the outside, without centering those that are living on the other side of the wall. And I think that it is important for us to uplift them in this moment. That being said, what are things that we should be advocating for as far as service availability, service delivery, or even beyond that? What is your belief that we should be advocating for, especially when it comes to HIV care and more specifically mental health?
I think first of all, mental health care that's not controlled by the system. I think the system that...
Tell me more. In my Andrew Alleman voice, tell me more.
Say more.
Say more. You know, and I just think a system that is causing harm already can't be a system that is in charge of healing. And
I can't beat you up and stitch you up at the same time.
And I don't want to say that you can't heal when you've caused harm, but I think when your main focus is perpetuating harm,
you're actually in causing the harm at the moment.
It's hard to focus on how to heal. And so that's a piece that I think is really important. And also, folks inside don't trust it. Right? How could you trust talking to somebody who you know is a part of the same system that you feel like is taking away all of your autonomy, right? So that part I think is really important. I think more providers is really important. And we just don't have access to enough providers. So you have a small number of providers that are trying to be mental health, supports for far too many people. Right? So that quality of care in itself is not great. And, I just think the pieces that, we want to see here in the community is the same reflection. So I want to see the same quality of care. I want to see, access to different folks that have different experiences. Timeliness, right? That it doesn't take... months for somebody going through a mental health crisis to be able to have somebody in front of them. So I would say, I say it's easy because it seems so basic to me, right? But those are the basic, simple things that I think are really important to start with when we look at providing supports inside.
In addition to that.
And paid by the system.
Yes, and I think confidentiality, it's that is a huge deterrent for folks inside of I don't want anyone else to know something. Maybe my roommate doesn't want to know. I don't trust these COs to know because they know my cousin on the street, or this is Omaha, we all know somebody in some way, shape, or form, or they just may be messy when I'm walking through the child hall. Like, this is fear. So like really holding people accountable to them being owed confidentiality, and a 2-for-1 special. Community-based organizations stop acting like corrections isn't in the city of Omaha. So if you serve the city of Omaha, niece, the prison is in the city of Omaha.
Period.
My God.
Say that again.
My God.
Say that again.
My God.
That's something.
It's
everywhere except for this.
Everywhere but
It's
this
building,
but
right?
this block.
Building that's downtown.
And it shouldn't be that Tommy going inside is like so huge, because everyone should be going in there. Everyone should be linking people to services. A jail, most of those folks are coming out of there, so why would you not give them the support they need so when they come out,
it's not a foreign experience.
Well, and the propensity of them to recidivate is lower because as y'all said, They've built these connections. They have the services. If I'm there for 6 months and I've known Tommy for 6 months inside, it's so much easier for me to get out and go to nap than you telling me to go that day and I get out and I got $20 to catch a bus and all the things that happen when you're released. We need to really use that time. But CBOs need to challenge the system and say, we're coming in. And if you don't let us come in, we gonna be loud and say, why won't you let us come in? Use your power and privilege to advocate for incarcerated people. And don't just wait to get us when we get out, because then you have those numbers and that data gets you a grant. Like, care about people when those numbers do not get you new funds.
That's a whole word. And it speaks to about that calling out piece, about us being loud. I like that, because the reality is that so much of the harm that happens behind the wall because of the level of secrecy that is permitted and perpetuated in that system.
Yeah.
We don't have the time. Okay, so that
should have been a two-parter.
It should have been. It should have been.
Y'all brought us here for 20 minutes.
Knowing good and well.
Play.
Okay, so that being said, we've talked about things. That's all. Just a little.
We'll be back for the live show.
That's it.
There you have it.
Just a little bit then about things that you think that we should be advocating for concerning people living with HIV on the outside. Can we talk a little bit to that? Are there gaps? Are there ways in which we're falling short? Are there ways in which we're not promoting it enough, or the people that we are entrusting with these clients, are they the right folks? Are they talk to me a little bit. I just felt you was telling me a little bit. Huh? It's the preacher moment going on.
I mean, as going through school, we didn't talk about HIV and how that impacts, mental health. That was through my own education or my own personal education and employment. So I think I would like to see more access to information about HIV to medical providers, mental health providers, as well as medical providers. And then I think access to mental health providers in general is needed in the community. As we know from your other sessions too, is that the folks that are most impacted by HIV are often folks that don't have access to some of those resources. So if we make it difficult to access mental health services, that's just further perpetuating the harm that they're experiencing, and that's community harm because we are a part of that. So I just think the access piece and the cost of mental health care is astronomical, and so that is difficult for folks that don't have access to insurance.
Dominique, can you talk to us a little bit? That just bling bling. Can you talk to us a little bit about the complexities of that when you add to that someone, yes, they're on the outside, but they are formerly incarcerated or their system impacted. Can we talk about ways in which there are gaps that are happening in that connection to mental health services?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is stop being so excited to declassify someone as poor so you can snatch services away from them. The line for them to get services is they're making $30,000 a year. They make $30,000 in $1, and you were so excited to file that paperwork. And they may have had a job for a week. They ain't even seen that reflected in their first check yet. But you've taken away the thing that allowed them to stabilize and access this piece. I was so frightened at Charles Drew. So frightened. And I could afford it, but I was so afraid in how they went about it. So stop removing these supports that are working because they're not as poor as we want them to be to offer support. I think the other piece about system impacted folks specifically is that you really have to keep supporting them and recognizing that this journey is theirs and they own it. That you don't work for the system, that you're not like any other. It's not your fault that every other therapist has worked for the system or has harmed them, but it is part of your work to unpack because you've chosen to engage. Recognize that and don't give up in that way. Stop reading people's files in efforts to try to know them and then hold all of that against them. Because if you read what they said about me when I was inside versus who I was out here, my goodness. And housing is huge. Housing is huge. I cannot have the audacity to talk about someone about taking their meds and they don't know where they're going to sleep tonight.
Facts.
I can't talk to you about, oh, you need a regimen and you don't have a sleep pattern, right? Or at a time when meds used to have to be refrigerated, you know, and you don't have a refrigerator, niece. Or you know what I'm saying? We give them ice packs. Pardon? What? So it's so that housing piece, I think if there's one thing we can think about is, and I in my mind, I've been thinking lately, I'm not as plugged into like where Hopwa is nationally and in Nebraska, but it's a huge support. We have to expand that. We have to make sure that people are housed, because if they got a place to go, they got a place to sleep, that's the foundation that we build on. A lot of us want to build with these folks and we've given them no stable foundation. And housing is a huge start.
It's a cornerstone.
And specifically the long-term Hopwa. You know, not just I'll pay the first month's rent. It's you know, that's great and all. Yeah. But what do I do after that? So I think other quick things that I want to mention is I often say relationship is an intervention. So specifically what Dominique was talking about is understanding that building that relationship and that rapport, and understanding that you may be modeling a new therapeutic relationship that they haven't had experience before. And then also for the therapists that are watching or the clinicians that are watching, is also think about folks that have been incarcerated for a long period of time are now coming out into a world of COVID where everything has moved online. So if I've been incarcerated for 25 years and I'm coming out now, I don't even, like, technology has changed so much, and now you're telling me the only way I can access mental health care is if I can figure out how to get on my computer and download Zoom and go to here and
find some
go to this email and find some Wi-Fi. Like, I've worked with multiple people that's been barriers. So I just think those pieces are really important to think about as well.
Yeah. And he talked to the providers. I'm going to tell y'all that aren't providers or anything in that space, these folks work for you. Period.
Facts.
Even if you're not writing the check, I can promise you someone is.
You can hire and
like they're there because they care and they have good intentions, but they're also getting a coin. Not as much coin as they should get, Ashe. But they are there in a service. They work for you, so do not be afraid to ask, to challenge, to say this is what I need. The worst they can say is no, and then ask somebody else
and give your expectation.
Absolutely. This has been an amazing conversation, and I appreciate you all coming and joining us. I know it's been a short time.
Part two.
I know there needs to be a part two. We need to circle back. I do want you to both. There may be someone watching right now that is dealing with an HIV diagnosis, be it new, be it old, be it whatever. That right now is grappling with the idea of accessing mental health services or not, for perhaps a number of reasons. And I would love for you all to speak to them and to speak to why it is that you would encourage them accessing mental health services.
My favorite thing about my therapist is that it is somebody who doesn't have a stake in my life. They're not family, they're not friends, and so it's just a non-biased like space where I can just share. So I think if you are somebody that needs to get something off your chest and share, that's a perfect confidential space, legally confidential. So that would be my plug.
I would say that everyone talks about accessing mental health services from this space of a deficit. I really look at it as it makes me mentally strong.
Yes.
So the things that you are fighting right now that feel huge, that's the space that you go in and you work out. You get ready and you can go back out and you can fight. Yeah. And then you know what, in 7 days I get to go, or whenever you go back in, I there literally have been days when I've been like, no matter what's coming at you, Dominique, you got certain hours before you can sit down with somebody and work through that. So look at it from a space of strength and not from a space of deficit. Because the more that you run away from it, the more that those demons get to tell you it's about you being weak. The great thing about having a practitioner in your life is that they get to be louder than those demons in your head and talk about all the strength you have. And so please, for you, do that for your own strength and for your own power.
I didn't bring my wallet with me. I was going to raise an offering.
Right,
Cash App
right,
is,
huh? Because what you're doing is preaching. So listen, I think it's been a great, yeah, you hear me? In the description of the video will be, so we're grateful for the conversation.
Just donate to Black and Pink.
That part. Two wonderful agencies here that are doing the work. Black and Pink is doing amazing work with system impacted folk as well as individuals, and more specifically LGBTQ plus, identifying folks that are system impacted and those that are living with HIV or that are impacted by HIV. Nebraska AIDS Project, of course, is Nebraska's only AIDS service organization, and we're getting away from the language AIDS service organization, but as of right now, that's the designation that is utilized.
We do it best.
We do it the best. We are the leading agency in the work. So, that being said, I think we'll end by saying we just want people to have the day that they want people living with HIV to have.